The world of football with a soccer perspective. This is Soccer Today with Duane, Rollins and Kevin Laramee. Live on the Sports Podcasting Network.
Good day, good night, and welcome to Soccer Today for Monday, September 30th, 2019. I'm Kevin Laramee, joined by Duane Rollins. How you doing today, Duane?
I'm doing you know what? To warm up my voice before I do this, I always repeat the intro, so people must think I'm insane as I'm screaming Sports Podcasting Network into my phone every morning. I always think that I must look like a weirdo.
As long as you don't yell the "Golazo" and then really, truly destroy your voice.
Yes, no, I just like to get into radio voice time. I don't do true radio voice live on the top of the hour, but I do like to get up to injection a little bit. So that's how I do it every morning. I'm not crazy if you see me do it.
Classical radio voice. Yeah, this is Kevin Laramee live on Jazz 92.1.
Yeah, well, I was going to say that's more of a jazz radio voice.
Oh, yeah.
Like our late nights with Johnny Fever.
A little barbershop quartet in the weekend. Carlos Vela with a great performance, now equaling Joseph Martinez's record. That happened this weekend. Joseph Martinez's record is now tied. What is it, 3 straight seasons that we have like goal scorers? Was it Bradley Rice Phillips in 2017 or was it 2016?
Yeah, it's all these records seem to be going. And it's a points record too. Each year has been pushed. Whether LA gets there or not, we'll see. But
the goals conceded record too. FC Cincinnati conceded their 75th goal for their worst defensive season in Major League Soccer history.
Just tells you there's more offense in the league nowadays and that makes sense with all the TAM investment because they've really focused TAM NDP investment primarily on offensive talents, right? And then you don't increase the salary cap to the same level, and what you have are these high-end offensive talents going against the same defenders that were in the league 10 years ago, and it shows. And that's why we have all these records. But it's fun and it's entertaining, so we go with it.
Yeah, no, exactly. We go with it. But yesterday, Duane, before we go in details and review the weekend and look at which teams are eliminated from the playoffs, like everybody outside the playoffs in the Eastern Conference, and then looking at the potential playoff teams in the West, I had the opportunity yesterday afternoon. It was organized by the Montreal Impact and pro referees, a media roundtable with Howard Webb himself, general manager of pro referees, an hour and 15 minutes or so, Duane, with Howard Webb in an open discussion. Nothing was off table. And of course, as you expect, video review was a big part of the presentation and also a big part of discussion after. And I quite enjoyed listening, hearing, exchanging about refereeing and the different aspects of it. It does put it in perspective because refereeing, it is a job where when we talk about what you do, usually it's not for the right reason. And it was fun to talk to someone that is one level removed from the actual action, but that in his mind there's an ideal world and they're trying to make that ideal world reality. So it was a fun afternoon, Duane.
Well, I'm glad. It's a good thing I wasn't there because I would have. That's nice, Howard. I'd like to talk to you about the
remember that game in 2007
Derby. What were you thinking? No,
it's funny though because at one point after this, I was walking around and Paul Vance, who's writes for my Royal Soccer, he's a known United fan. So I'm like, yeah, you must have had fun, and then he started laughing.
It's United's 12th man. I don't believe that to be the case, but nonetheless, United was in a lot of big games, and Howard Webb refereed a lot of big games, so they're very well acquainted. Obviously, he refereed a World Cup final as well, so a referee that has been at the highest level. So it would have been interesting to be part of that. Kevin, what did he have to say about VAR? I mean, they've got to sort of defend it to a certain level, but
that was the presentation before. The 15 to 20 minute presentation was not necessarily defending video review, and I'm going to call it video review because VAR itself is for video assistant referee. That's the name of the person, and it's actually called video review. And as you can see, this is the famous sheet that I was given yesterday, and I had that sheet as well in Chicago 2 years ago when I when I was present. That's my little Francism. When I assisted, not assisted again. Jesus Christ. It's Monday, eh? Case of the Mondays this morning. When I was present at a presentation in Chicago by Howard Webb, which was a bit similar. But Duane, there's a lot of numbers I could say. Like right now, there's 21 referee, 3 kind of in turn. So there's 24 different referees refereeing in Major League Soccer in 2019. That number is going to go up for 2020 with the amount of teams joining Major League Soccer, and also the amount of travel included, and also the amount of VARs, AVAR. So starting next year, there'll be 26 full-time referee employed by Pro doing Major League Soccer games. There's more, of course, in the USL and in the NWSL, which are the other leagues that Pro assign referees for. Also, the games in Canada, there's a partnership with the CSA and Pro referees where you have an exchange of I would say an exchange of principles where Canadian referees will referee in the States in the same amount of games that the Canadian referees refereeing in the States are going to be refereed by Americans in Canada. It's an exchange. They work together. Games in the Canadian Premier League, games in the Canadian Championship, games on Canadian soil are the responsibility of the Canadian Soccer Association. When it comes to MLS, it is also, there's a working partnership with Pro, and they let Pro assign the referees for that aspect. The rest, it's Canadian Championship. So if you're thinking, why the ball called with Drew Fisher, not called Oro last week in the final, well, that has nothing to do with Pro. That was the Canadian Soccer Association. Even though Drew Fisher is a pro referee, they also can take other, accreditation. So that's one thing. There's going to be one more Canadian next year, Duane. Joe Fletcher is going to be probably full-time as a assistant referee, one of the person responsible for the assistant referees for linesmen in the Office of Pro. But a big number that we were talking about yesterday is the amount of mistakes VAR made. About 24 mistakes out of over 1,000 incidents. They would classify a mistake, Duane, by saying it was a clear and obvious error, and we either did not change the call, so the VAR did not flag it as a potential clear and obvious error and didn't send it to the video review for the referee, or it was sent to the referee and the bad call was maintained. There's 24 of those, according to Howard Webb and Pro Referee in 2019 in Major League Soccer.
Yeah, I think it frustrates a lot of people that they have that in data, but they won't release it. And I do get to a certain extent that they want to protect the referees because it is a difficult job, blah, 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 blah. But the thing is, like, if I'm a goalkeeper and I make a mistake, everyone sees that and we get on with it because they're professionals, right? So I honestly think that transparency would be a great thing for referees to have a little bit more of when it comes to how they, not discipline, but supervise and how they can be, how they work to improve, basically, is what I'm coming at. Because I think, outside of the 90 minutes each week, most players understand that these guys, are just humans, that they're going to be, fallible, right? They're going to make mistakes themselves. And even though it's frustrating when it happens, they as long as they're working to improve, just like their teammates, then they're going to be happy with it. So I think a little more transparency there would be good. And it's good that they do stuff like what you experienced on the weekend as well to help us understand it a little bit more as well.
And it was public, and the audio of the roundtable is available for patrons right now. We'll see if we make it available for the entire public. But right now, if you want to get access to it, it's $2 a month. We'll give you access to the Two Solid Two Soccer podcast, and of course, bonus shows like the Howard Webb Media Roundtable. Duane, one thing that I thought was fascinating is just putting things a bit more in perspective. You mentioned the stats, and we forget sometimes that they're like, oh, why didn't it go to review? Every single thing is reviewed in real time, and when the VAR, which is the person in charge or his two or her two assisting VAR, send it to video review, then it's the referee's call. But in most cases, they do pick up 24 out of thousands of incidents. But the 24, it can be costly, of course. If you look, 3 of them were talked about yesterday that involved the Montreal Impact directly and would directly change results of game, going from losses to draws. And then who knows how the game changes at that moment, and it could be wins. And what if the Montreal Impact had 2 more wins this season? Well, the Montreal Impact would not be eliminated from the playoffs. So it does skew the discussion too. Like, well, of course it makes mistake, but what I've been able to decipher, it's not, the computer is still manned by man or woman, but by people. And that's where there's mistake, because people make mistakes.
Yeah, well, look, and there's human nature happening as well. I mean, we see it in the Premier League, which I know he's not talking about. But if you look at
he
how the
actually
Premier
did a
League
little
has,
bit. He actually did talk a little bit about it because he was present in the VR booth a few weeks ago in the Premier League to look at things. So, no, you should truly go listen to the Howard Webb. And when I say you, not just you, Duane, it's everyone
sure.
listening.
Yeah, well, what I was going to say though, like, there's clear differences country to country how VAR is used, right? Like you can see it if you watch enough different soccer. And in England, they are very reluctant to overturn decisions on the field that aren't offside or handball, that aren't black and white in their mind. Like they're very reluctant to overturn subjective stuff. And I would suspect, I don't know this for sure, but I suspect that the threshold for clear and obvious is much higher in England, which personally I prefer, as anyone who's listened to me talk about this topic knows. MLS famously, and they haven't had incidents like the Kaká slap, quote unquote slap from a couple years ago when VAR first came in. They haven't had stuff like that.
Yeah,
since.
when he just brushed his face, basically, he basically gave him like a little like reassuring or reconforting little touch. Like, no, you slapped him. The video, there's a frame of you touching the face, and that's a red card by the law. So boom.
Yeah, they've kind of they backed off that a little bit. Thank God.
Because every single play you can find something if you slow down, and that's one thing he addressed too. He's like, we have to be careful. So I don't think the problem is at the top. I think the problem is somewhere more closer to where the field is when the decision-making process happens. And that's one thing they did address too. Development of referees. How do you handle the growth of soccer in North America with the size of the U.S. freaking hell, having 10,000 teams popping up every week? How do you keep up for referees and the development and the training? Which leads to streamlining the process of VAR, which leads to the article that I wrote last night, available on sportspodcastingnetwork.com right now. MLS is looking, and pro referees, of course, because pro referees is mainly subsidized by Major League Soccer, USS Soccer Federation, and a small participation as well from the Canadian Soccer Association. But Major League Soccer and pro referees, Duane, are looking to centralize the video operation room, where it would be similar to what Major League Baseball, to what National Hockey League use, and it might be beneficial, and all the details can be found in my latest article.
Fair enough, yeah. Look, you talk in general sense. Forget VAR for a second. Just in general sense, I know that a lot of people get very frustrated by pro, and I think that's par for the course because this is a part of the world which is developing in terms of the football world. Just like the players, the referees maybe aren't as advanced. You have some very good referees in North America for sure, and even at the amateur level. Like, I mean, these guys are more talented than you think. When I worked for League One Ontario, I saw it firsthand how hard they worked and how difficult their job is and how much abuse they take in the sidelines. And I I think it would benefit anyone that is a ref basher to spend some time on a fourth official table. I be careful when I say that, but to be around and to watch this play out, to know
a ball comes quickly too. You have to be mindful of you have to be aware of your surroundings.
Yeah, and look, when you work directly with them, you understand that they are very good, but they are also learning, right? And this is, I think, the biggest issue when it comes to refereeing in North America. And I talked about this when the Canadian Premier League launched. I thought it was an underspoken of issue that they might run into. And we saw it with the Calgary-York game this weekend, where it was a bit bizarrely refereed and 2 red cards and the whole 9 yards, right? We'll get to that on Tuesday, I'm sure.
That should be a song, though. 2 red cards and the whole 9 yards.
There you go. It sounds like a Christmas carol of some kind. Yeah. But you need to streamline, as you say, the training program, and I think there needs to be a real effort. And this is isn't just a soccer issue. I refereed hockey as a kid, and it was even back then it was an issue to get people into it in the first place. Is very difficult because you think about it. If you played the game at any level, and those are the best players, candidates, I should say, to go into refereeing because you understand the game. Why would you ever subject yourself to that? I quit refereeing hockey because I had coffee thrown at me as like a 20-year-old for a peewee game. I was chased across the ice once by a grown-ass man when I was a teenager. Like,
I was going to get ridiculous. There. I've seen in soccer and hockey and other sports, football, I've seen referees being abused in the parking lot, to not say beaten up, just because of call. Yeah, no, exactly. And that stuff has to be addressed, and we give it lip service. We do, and we all understand logically that this is wrong, but it still happens because people there's something about the culture of sport that allows us in our mind. I had this conversation
someone was complaining about an MLS game last week, and I actually on Twitter briefly engaged in this. It's like, well, why can't I criticize them? And I responded to this person, you can criticize them, but you can't scream at them. You can't get into their face. You can't belittle them as human beings. That's where you cross the line. And we've got to really get that out of sport if we want to get better referees, because, as I said, even if you do start the process of becoming a referee, why would you stick with it if you're dealing with that? When you're learning too, and you make a mistake on the field, why in God's name would you go back the next week for, it's not much money.
No, I think that's one of the things I learned too, is a lot of the assistant referees, linesmen, they don't do this full time. So if you want to learn more about refereeing, and especially pro referees, I suggest you check out our Webb Roundtable on our Patreon feed, patreon.com/sportspodcastnetwork. You can check my article at sportspodcastnetwork.com, and you can always take a look at the website of Pro Referees, which has a lot of resources that we're not aware of, like their take on video review, their take on calls, because it happens a few days, if not a couple of weeks after the fact. Because of their own CBA, they have an evaluation process after each game for all the assistant referees, all the referees themselves. There's a ranking of referees in their department with points regarding key incidents and the whole performance for games. There's rankings, there's evaluation process. Their employment is justified by that ranking and by the evaluation process, or lack thereof employment, or they're not doing well. So that's why it always takes a couple days, 5 days usually, because it usually comes out on Fridays on ProReferees.com, if not more, because they have to talk to the actual referees and tell them that, and then make it public. And that's all because of their CBA. So sometimes we're wondering, why aren't the referees talking about something? Well, you can't really ask the referee to commit on a public forum and literally maybe saying something against his own work, when the amount of money he's going to make at the end of the day is going to be decided with his performance too. So that's going to be happening in the private setting, and that's why it's delayed with the response of Pro Referees, which comes out on Fridays on their website.
Yeah, and it's pretty easy, even if you don't look for that, to know what the rankings are when you get towards the business end of a season, because the referees that we're going to be seeing refereeing the matches the rest of the way through after the season ends, they're the ones higher up on the platform.
They are. All right, let's take a little quick break, and when we come back, the weekend review, and we'll look at the playoffs.
You are listening to Soccer Today. Follow us on Twitter at SoccerTodaySPN and like our Facebook page, facebook.com/Sports Podcasting Network. You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.
And we're back on Soccer Today. I'm Kevin Laramee with Duane Rollins. Did you enjoy your MLS soccer weekend?
It was fun. Yeah, I had a good weekend. All in all. Spent some time out and about as well. Got some soccer in. It was a good weekend. Got a little nervous in the City game on Saturday, but we'll talk about that on Tuesdays. They got the result. It's fine. And good weekend altogether. Liverpool with another goalkeeping error. Again, talk about that tomorrow. I'm really eager to talk about England, I guess.
I guess, yeah. Well, let's start not with England, but let's start with the newer version. Let's start with the New England Revolution. Their win at home has eliminated the Montreal Impact, the Chicago Fire, and I guess Orlando too, by definition. Guess who scored? Guess who scored the first goal for New England?
You tell me. You tell our listeners.
Okay. Who would be the only one person in New England that I, a Canadian soccer fan, would not want to score?
He's had a pretty good season, actually.
Yeah, he did.
Teal has. So, yeah, he's kind of had a rebound season. He still probably wouldn't be in the Canadian men's net. This is what anyone who – I get it. I mean, I literally scream at the TV every time I see Owen Hargreaves still. So I get it. But he wouldn't even really be in the conversation for Canadian men's national team anymore.
No, it's true. But, you never know what could happen. The Impact needs a striker.
I think he'd be behind Teshu in the pecking order.
That's what I'm going to say, Dwayne. The Impact needs a striker. And, yeah. I wouldn't be surprised if Teal Bunbury.
Well, especially if Dad comes to.
Well, You're taking everything that I was thinking and putting it out there. If Dad starts a team in Laval in Montreal, maybe feels like, well, I'll go to MLS and eventually maybe I'll come and play a season to help you sell tickets. Who knows? That could be potential, but that's not what we're talking about. Let's continue and take a look at the results in Major League Soccer. New England, with their win against NYCFC, in fact, sealed the playoff faith. The only thing now is who's going to finish where in the Eastern Conference. But the Red Bulls, DC United 0-0. Impact 1, Atlanta 1. That was a fun game to watch. I'm not going to lie. This was an interesting game. Back and forth. The Impact tried and tried and tried. But at the end of the day, it was not going to happen. Even a win would not have helped Montreal. But at least it's not a loss. Boyant scored. And we had a Julian Gressel goal earlier for a 1-1 draw. Chicago-Toronto 2-2. Omar Gonzalez late getting the equalizer, but Chicago-Toronto 2-2. Chicago now eliminated from the playoffs with this draw, but also with New England's win. Toronto looking like, yes, maybe they will get a playoff spot at home. We'll see if they can stay at fourth.
Yeah, well, they're in sixth right now, but they
could go up to fourth.
Yeah, they can go as high as fourth. They can go as low as seventh. New England would have to win. They would have to lose for seventh to happen. They will be playing in the playoffs, that's for sure. Really, if you look at next week's schedule, we'll get a lot more into this as the week progresses. We'll obviously spend a lot of time this week setting up the final weekend. We'll probably get an MLS guest on later towards the week to preview the final weekend, and then obviously next weekend we'll be talking about the playoff matchups. For Toronto, they have to win. That's what it comes down to. And if you listen to Greg Vanney's post game following the Chicago, they really stress process, that it's important for Toronto to just do well next weekend and not really worry about the positioning. DC and New York both have lighter touches. All three teams are playing out of playoff teams. So really, if it goes to chalk, then it will stay the way it is right now, where it'll be DC, New York, Toronto in that order, 2 points to get clustered. So it's a very close finish. And, ultimately, if Toronto doesn't get a home playoff date, it will be because of that swoon they had in June, not necessarily anything they've done since. It's an interesting phenomena to look at TFC right now, because as I put a Twitter poll out this morning, which is right now about 1/3, 2/3 in terms of the answer, I asked whether Toronto, what was Toronto's form? And I said, are they 9 games without a loss, or are they 3 wins in the last 9? You know what I mean? Like, that is your ultimate half full, half empty thing. They have 6 draws in their last 9 games,
which is not bad.
But it's also not great, right?
It's not a lot of wins. Yeah, it's 2 points per game loss if you look at it that way.
It's if Toronto FC, if I had any, we talked about this last week, obviously in the Voyageurs Cup. If I had any confidence whatsoever that TFC could win a penalty shootout, then I'd be a little more. I could make an argument that okay, it's fine. They haven't been losing, so as long as they can keep things tight, then maybe they have to win a shootout here and there. But no, who thinks they're going to do that? Right?
Nobody, like Mel Lastman would say.
Blind squirrel sometimes finds a nut and all, but
sure.
It doesn't seem likely that they are going to mentally get over that hurdle in the next 2 weeks. So they're going to have to find a way to find wins. Now, they'll have extra time to do it. It won't go straight to penalties like the Voyageurs Cup did. So there is that. But look, again, I don't know the answer to that. And as I said, right now, Toronto fans are typically cynical to begin with, and they were spoiled in 2017, so a lot of them not only are typical cynical, they just have an unrealistic expectation of what an MLS team is. So the half empty is winning the pool. I suspect. Well, also I have a lot of Montreal followers who are just probably voting half empty in spite,
like clicking that no.
Yeah. So it's a Twitter poll. You take it for what it is.
Yeah, it's not a scientific exercise, but it is at least it's a thought experiment. Let's move to the Western Conference. Minnesota 1, LAFC 1. Interesting game. Carlos Vela scored his 31st goal of the season to tie the record for most amount of goals in one season in Major League Soccer. That record was held by Josef Martinez from last year. Now, will he be able to beat that record next week? We will see. Zlatan scored as well for the Galaxy, but we'll get to that game. What a cracker of a game. Speaking of cracker of a game, Colorado facing elimination, facing a direct opponent in the playoffs. No problem. Last home game for Tim Howard for the Colorado Rapids. And a clean sheet, 3 goals. Colorado 3, FC Dallas 0. No one wants to make the playoffs in the Western Conference.
Look, if Colorado can somehow find its way in, then I don't know if you want to play them as the second seed, but it will still take a lot of results to go their way in the final week. They are right now, if they were to get a win and have Dallas and San Jose lose, then they would draw even. They would actually, that would do it for them when I look at this clearly, because they would then have one more win than Dallas. So that's what it's going to take. I think I don't know, I'm kind of cheering for them a little bit.
But you cannot have your faith rest in San Jose's hands right now. San Jose is literally dropping the ball. They're screwing their first half of season by having one of the most terrible month and a half to finish a season I've ever seen.
It's and as I said last week, I think that they're going to. It has a lot to do with teams figuring them out. For the record, and again, we'll get into the previews next week, it is going to be really tough because Colorado is playing LAFC to finish the season, whereas you have Portland against Dallas, and San Jose is playing. One moment here while I figure that out for you. It's San Jose. I had it a second ago and I forgot it, but it is.
I'll tell you.
So
San Jose next week, they're playing Portland, which is
Dallas
fascinating.
Is
yeah. Here, we'll finish the scores here, and we'll get back to the standings in a second. San Jose 0, Seattle Sounders 1. A Tommy Thompson red card. You don't see that every day. At Via Stadium last night, Real Salt Lake Houston Dynamo 2-1. Real Salt Lake. Real Salt Lake has agreed to part ways with their general manager as well. Sporting Kansas City 2, Portland 2. 2 red cards in this game. It was a weird game. Portland 46 points. Not going to be easy to. There's a potential they could slip out. It's going to be on decision day. Decision day only matters in the Western Conference. And that was the result this weekend. Duane, you mentioned the standings. You mentioned the teams fighting for it. We know LAFC is going to finish first in the Western Conference. 69 points right now. Clinched the Supporters' Shield. Minnesota 16 points back, second. Seattle third and 53 points, same as Minnesota. The Galaxy 51 points. I think they're safe in fourth. They might even host a playoff game. Real Salt Lake qualified for the playoff. They clinch 50 points, fifth. Now Portland in sixth position with 46 points. FC Dallas 45 points in seventh. Can the Earthquakes or the Rapids find a way to settle Dallas on the seventh spot?
Well, yeah, that is your biggest question heading into the final week. And as we say, if you're looking on form, Colorado has the best chance. But then again, they're playing the team that is chasing the all-time record, right? So that said, LAFC might choose to rest. But that said, LAFC has a bye, so maybe resting's a bad idea. Do you really want to sit your players down for what? It'd be 2.5 weeks, right? So there's a lot going on there. Ultimately, we're talking about seventh place. Which probably shouldn't excite us too much. Although if Colorado were to get that seventh place, they'd have to win on the road, obviously. It's a big advantage.
All the way. And that's what I see. Imagine you have to play every single game on the road. And I guess we're not going this. Maybe I'll be wrong. We'll see. But off the top of my head, I do not believe we will see a road team from the early, a seventh or sixth spot make it all the way to MLS Cup and winning. I do not see this mountain of a task to win on the road 4 games to be doable.
The other thing, right now, Dallas at 45 is them, and they're tied with New England for the worst record in the playoffs. So the only way that those teams would host a game is that they somehow both made it to a final, right? That is the other thing to watch for in the last week, is you have to look at the combined standings to see where MLS Cup would shake down. Just as a little hint, Torontonians, don't save the money. Save the money for the flight if you really think they're going to get there.
Flight or for gas, because it's going to be LA or New York. That's what I think. Yeah,
so, if it's New York, Toronto doesn't have to worry about it anyway, right? So there you go.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. And it would be at Citi Field. That's what I think. But that's what is the portrait of the playoffs right now, and what's to play for on Decision Day, 4 p.m. next Sunday.
And we'll have, as I said a couple times already, we'll make sure to have lots of guests in the way to this, and then we have lots of time to preview it after that. But it's, we'll worry about the previews when the previews happen and all the matchups happen. It's going to be, if you look at the Battle Royale beyond the top positions. New York and LA have clearly been so much better than the East and the West, and we're continuing to ignore Philadelphia in this conversation as well.
I know. What? I didn't even utter the word Philadelphia in this. They're third in the Eastern Conference, and
with a chance to move up. Well, they can move second, but it's
second. That's it. But they could.
Yeah, right now that would be Toronto's opponent if they were the playoffs were to start today. So it is going to be. There will be upsets in the play. As much as we talk about how it's going to be very difficult to win from a lower seed, and I believe that, I do think a lower seed will win one of those games. That's just par for any playoff, right? So
one, yes. Two, maybe. 3, 4? No.
Well, yeah, to win all the way. Like if you're just go back to TFC for a second. If TFC ends up in 6th, I mean, you're not host. You're gonna have to win 4 playoff or 4 road games in a row. That's just not something they ever do. So I could see them pulling an upset in one game. Josie scores a great goal.
Exactly.
Omar shuts it down.
Omar scores on a header once again, which could happen. Damn.
And they're playing Philadelphia, a team that really has no playoff experience or something like that. Yeah, sure, why not? But then to follow that up the next week by beating NYCFC, it's starting to get into fantasy land at that point.
It's starting to be rainbows and bubbles and unicorns.
Yeah, I wouldn't. I'll probably put $5 on the win MLS Cup just for the sake of it. But I'm not putting 50 on like I did last year. So I would have won $4,000 though. In my defense.
Yeah, $4,000 is $4,000. But yeah, it's a good idea.
$50 is $50.
$50 is $50. That's true.
It was circling a bowl by the end of the regular season last year.
Yeah. On that note, we'll rest our voices and we'll prepare for tomorrow. We'll look at Europe tomorrow because Tuesdays are for Europe and more of the world of football with a soccer perspective. As always, you can follow Duane on social media at 24th Minute and myself at Kev Laramee. And you can find this show anywhere you get your podcasts. Apple Podcasts, Google Play Store, Spotify, and everywhere else you get your podcasts. Video review available on YouTube, on Twitter, and on our Facebook page. But as always, until tomorrow, for Duane Rollins, I'm Kevin Laramee. We wish you a great soccer.
You can find the podcast version of all the shows we do on iTunes, Apple Podcast, Google Play Store, TuneIn Radio, iHeartRadio, and anywhere you get your podcast.